I want to go a little deeper into the use of the starch tool and introduce the other tool in the puppet tool group, which is the overlap tool. Usually when you're dealing with a character with a higher level of detail and a higher level of realism in particular, you're going to have to be a lot more careful about how you handle your starch. It's not going to be enough just to create a simple bend in a simple cartoony arm. You're trying to sort of simulate some sort of realistic movement here with the overlapping of clothes and the joints bending in the right place and a feeling of a skeleton running through the body. It's a little more tricky. So I'm going to show you some kind of deep dark tricks to help you out in these more complex situations. So let's dive on in here. We're going to just work on this right arm here. So let's solo these two layers. Now this was delivered to me with the hand all as one piece, with the thumb and the hand as a single piece. But I realized pretty quickly in starting to do some test rigs on this that we were going to need to separate the thumb. So I did a little photoshopping and I separated the thumb off there from the arm piece, and the arm is actually a comp of several pieces, but I separated the thumb from the hand, and then we've pre-comped this together to create one single continuous piece of arm artwork with everything there except the thumb. And you'll see why we did that once we finish rigging this up. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add our puppet pins, build our FK chain, add our controller and our IK chain, and get this arm basically all rigged up, because once again it's much easier to work the starching and the overlapping we're going to need to do when the arm is fully rigged basically. So let's turn off the thumb here. We're just going to focus on this arm piece for now. Okay, you'll notice we're not using guides to place our pins here. We're going to more eyeball this and kind of think more about the anatomy and the skeletal structure inside this artwork. So we're going to be kind of eyeballing the artwork more than using guides in some kind of geometric way. We got to focus more on anatomy here. So I'm going to turn the torso on really quick and just think for a minute about this rotation point here. I think we probably want to put it just behind the edge of that torso, I think would be good. And we want to kind of hit sort of in the middle of this join here a little bit. So let's go about right there for that first pin. And then the elbow is probably going to want to bend about here. And since we know the puppet tool has a tendency to pinch, not a bad idea to kind of place it here where we have some natural pinching, and that might really help as we try to clean that up and get that joint looking good. So we're going to put the second pin there. And then this is a little tricky because the wrist is going to be just about right at the edge of this gauntlet here. And that's going to be a little tricky. That's where we're going to need to do some finessing to get that to work right, because it's going to need to flex there. But we also want to give a sense of relative stability to this gauntlet. It's going to have to bend right in here, but we're going to have to balance that out. So let's put that next pin about right here. And then we can also get some flexing in the hand here. So let's go ahead and put a pin kind of right at the knuckles there, where the knuckles would be. And then we'll put one last pin at the end, and we'll just be able to get a little bend on that hand there once we get this all rigged up. Okay, let's go ahead and hit our U key and reveal our pins, and then let's go ahead and name them. Okay, now that we have our pins all named, we can go ahead and add bone nulls to these. So let's hit the bone button there. There we have our nice little null bones. And let's parent these up. So fingertips to fingers, fingers to hand, hand to lower arm to upper arm. Okay? And then remember also we want to take the arm artwork and parent it to the upper arm. But let's make sure we have the anchor point in the right place. Right now the anchor point is way over here. Let's grab our pan behind tool, and we're just going to snap it to this null. This will be nice and easy. So I'm going to grab that, hold down the command key to engage snapping and snap that in so those will rotate off the same place. And then we'll parent that arm to that upper arm null. So now we have our FK chain built. Let's go ahead and build our IK chain. So we'll select the hand, create a controller, and name that controller right away. And we're going to resize it. And we'll move the anchor point down so it sits around that hand nicely. Round that off. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of these. And let's just adjust this just a little bit more. Needs to be off-centered a little bit too there. That's all right, as long as our anchor point is in the right place. It's again good to make the controller kind of intuitive. Okay, so let's just round these numbers off here. So about 170, let's say, and 60. Looks pretty good. I just like nice round numbers. It helps keep me sane when I'm doing this work. Okay, so there's our controller, and then let's go ahead and set up our IK chain. So remember, we're going to select from the bottom of the chain to the top, and then the controller. So holding down the command key, hand, lower arm, upper arm, controller, and then we'll hit the IK, two-layer IK with goal. Now let's go ahead and check our work here. Whoa! Okay, first of all, it's bending the wrong direction, so let's change the orientation. And you can see our IK chain is working, but we're getting some very bad pinching here. That doesn't look very good. And let's look at what's happening with that forearm. Oh, it's like a big piece of spaghetti. Okay, so this is definitely not moving in a very natural way. So it's time to do some of that ninja starching to get this working better. Okay, oops, I undoed back and unset that. Now, did you notice that that shifted a little bit when I checked that box? Okay, that's because our pins were not perfectly vertical. If your pins are not perfectly vertical, as they couldn't be with this arm because of the natural shape of the arm, when you do that little clockwise, counterclockwise shift, you're going to get a little bit of shifting in that elbow. It generally is not a problem in animation because you're usually switching these in the middle of fairly fast moves. But it is something to be aware of. Don't be afraid of it. It's not a bad thing, but it is something that you should be aware of. We also have stretchiness engaged here, although, you know, for this type of character, that's not necessarily all that useful unless you introduce an auxiliary elbow control or auxiliary knee control if you're doing it with a leg. And in that case, you want that stretching capability. And auxiliary elbow and knee controls are also very useful for more realistic animation because you can use them to simulate foreshortening to some degree. We'll go over auxiliary elbow and knee controls in one of the more advanced lessons at the end of the course. Okay, let's get to work cleaning up this mesh. I'm going to go ahead and zero out this position value so we can easily return it to its neutral position because we're going to have to play around with this quite a bit. And let's start with just a sort of basic, kind of fairly extreme bent pose there. And look at all that icky pinching we're getting here and there. Pretty gnarly. Okay, let's fix this up. So I'm going to select the arm layer. I'm going to hit the E key to open the puppet. I'm going to select the puppet, and then we're going to grab our starch tool here. And we'll start with our amount at 1%, and we'll start by just starching this upper arm and getting that in shape there. Ooh, that's pretty close. That was pretty close right off the bat there. Okay, that's working pretty good. Now, the logical thing to do next is just put a big batch of the same starch right in the middle of this forearm here. So let's try that. I think we're going to have to do something a little more subtle. Okay, that's not looking too bad right there. Okay, just trying to get rid of as much of that pinching as I can. Okay, and now we've got a nice, this is looking good here. But let's take a look at what's happening with the hand, because I'm not sure that's going to quite work right. We've got like a very hard edge here. And let me select that hand layer and let's rotate that a little bit. Oops, we gotta get this lag to catch up. There we go. Okay, now once again, that does not look very realistic, does it? First of all, we're getting some counter moving there, which we're probably just gonna have to live with some of that. I don't think we'll completely get rid of that. But the way that hand is bending does not feel very natural. I think what we need to do is get more flexibility back here in this part of the arm so that it can allow the hand to bend more naturally. Now even if we get some starch in that hand, and let's do that here. I'll return this to neutral real quick. Let's get a little starch in that hand. See how it's just a little offset there? That's because we reversed the orientation of the IK and it just shifted a little bit. The mesh is always going to kind of show in its original unsullied state even if your arm is flexed a little bit. So don't let this stuff throw you too much. Okay, I think what we're going to want to do is get a little... I think the first thing we want to do is pull back on the starch here on this arm. It's mostly just up way too high there, so let's pull that back a little bit. I'm trying to sort of fill in this back part, but leave a little more flex there. So let's try that, and let's see if that performs a little better. Okay, that's a little bit better. But that still doesn't feel very natural. Look at that. Yeah, we're getting some weird pinching happening here. The hand feels a little more solid, but we're getting some strange pinching here and some weird deformations on that guy there. So we still have some more work to do here. We've got to do something a little bit more subtle. So let's leave this bent. I straightened that hand out, but let's leave this bent for a minute here. And let's look at a slightly different approach. I'm going to select this again, grab that starch tool, and this time we're going to take this starch off for right now. Whoa, it gets really nasty. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this starch way down. Let's try half of this. So let's try 0.5. That still may be too much. And now let's try squirting that in there. And let's see what happens as we move this hand. And this is the deal with starch, is that you have to do a lot of trial and error. Okay, it's looking a little better. We're still getting like a funny sort of accordion thing there. I really need a lot more flex there in that arm. I think we're going to need to try something different. Let's select this first starch pin we squirted on, and instead of deleting this, let's just turn it down to 0. I'm going to go ahead and try something different, try an experiment, but it might not work. So I may want to come back to this original squirt of starch, which was sort of close. But I'm going to try something kind of totally different. Okay, even though it's still too much of a wet noodle back by the elbow, it actually looks better around the wrist with no starch at all. Let's try this. Let's leave that as it is for now. And let's try and straighten this out with a new squirt of starch, but this time covering a smaller area. First we're going to turn the amount from 0 to 1. Then we'll turn this extent down, and let's just blast a little just in here. Whoa, look at all the good that did. That really straightened that up. Now we're getting some bad overlapping here, but that's something we can deal with in a little bit. So let's see what happens now when we rotate this hand, and let's see if we're getting a little closer. Oh, much, much better. Okay, we're getting some flexibility in that wrist. Still getting quite a bit of movement up in here. We can maybe try to tone that down. Let's maybe try just expanding a little bit in there to see if we can maybe just get that a little bit stiffer right up in this back area here. Yeah. Now we're still getting that kind of counter rotation, but I would say that's pretty darn good. You're pretty much always going to get that with a 100% puppet tool situation. Now this hand could be separated and jointed separately and just the arm could be puppet tooled, that would be an option, but you'd run into some limitations with the edges of the gauntlet, and the puppet tool kind of takes care of those limitations by flexing that gauntlet. That's looking pretty realistic to me. That's working quite a bit better than where we were at before. Now we need to deal with this, because this does not look very good, even though the deformation is happening in a way that I like. That overlapping is really not working. It doesn't feel natural when you see kind of the inside edge of this gauntlet in a way that suggests the perspective is the other direction, and it doesn't feel like this would overlap that. It doesn't really look quite right. So this is where the overlap tool comes in with the puppet tool set. And it's pretty neat because it's pretty straightforward and can really fix difficult situations like this. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to select the puppet tool again, and now we're going to grab the puppet overlap tool. And I'm going to keep it set to 100% in front, and the extent is just like our extent with Starch. And this does sort of what you probably are already imagining this does. If I squirt in an area here, and we're going to be focusing on this area, and we got to kind of look at the art here, kind of imagine where the artwork is here on the mesh. But what we got to do is we got to squirt this to be in front. It's as simple as that. And by the way, this amount can be changed. You can get slightly different behaviors depending on how you set this. We're just going to go for something really simple here and just do 100% to get this fold of this shirt in front of this gauntlet here. So let's try it about right there. Okay, now you didn't see what happened because the tool kind of covered it up. So I'm going to just turn that off, and you see what happened? Let's zoom in there. You can see that now that part of the arm has come forward and is now laying on top of the other part when this pinches. So it's a pretty cool tool. Now let's test it out in motion and make sure we're not getting any strange behaviors there. Now this is a little weird. We get kind of a gnarly pinch right there. But as soon as that closes up, that looks pretty good. Now this to me seems a little too stiff still. And we need to, I think, make that flex just a little more, but I also want to try to get away from some of this pinching. So let's work just a little bit more on this and see if we can get this just a titch better. Now this is the name of the game with starching, particularly with something this subtle, that you have to do a lot of trial and error. You have to test and try things out in order to get the range of motion that you need. So let's look at that upper arm a little more and go back to the starch tool here. It's coming down pretty far. I wonder if we should pull this back just a little bit. Okay, but then we get more pinching, see? So I don't think we're going to get away with that, but I wonder if what we should do is try doing 2 layers. So let's pull this down quite a ways. And see how we kind of flesh that out a little bit? I might pull this back a little too. And pull the extent up just a tad. And then let's grab this and turn this way down. So let's try 0.5 on this. Alright, let's just kind of see where we're at with that and see if we got a little more softness. Come on now, catch up. There we go. Yeah, that feels a little more natural right in there. That's a substantial pinch, but it's not too bad. I'm really not sure if we have much hope of entirely getting rid of that little bit of pinching there, but let's try. Let's give it one more go, huh? Alright, I might try something somewhat radical here. And now that we've kind of eased back on this starch a little bit, I'm going to turn the amount back up to 1, but I'm going to turn the extent way down. This is probably going to be a little tough to see too. Maybe we'll try to blast just a little bit right in here. Let's move it around a little. Oh! almost getting rid of that pinching, but oh, that wasn't bad. Okay, there. That's about the least amount of pinching I've been able to get so far. Maybe we'll try just pulling this up 1.5. Alright, I think this was about our best bet there. Okay. And let's test it out in motion and make sure we don't have anything funny happening there. Come on, After Effects, catch up. There we go. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Pretty nice overlap. We've got a little flex in the arm. Let's see what happens when we rotate the hand. Okay, it's still a little bit rubber hosey there. Maybe we should try to just clean that up just a little bit more. I'm going to pull the extent out just a little more, and we'll pull it down just a little. And what I might do, this might be dangerous, I might put one more blob there, just shrink it way down. Alright, let's see what we get with that. Look at that. Alright, this is great. Look, we've got minimal counter curling there, but we've got nice natural looking flexibility with that gauntlet there. That's about the best we've seen this yet. Alright, some kind of ninja starching there. Last thing we need to do is get that thumb starched up and added to our rigging. Next thing we need to do is make sure the hand works and we can kind of close the fingers, and then we'll add the thumb. Let's go ahead and quickly rig in a finger control just to make this job a little bit easier. So I'm going to select the hand controller and we're going to add an angle control, and we'll call this right fingers. Then I'm going to lock the effect control window, and then we're going to grab the rotation value of the finger null here, hold down the Option key, enable expressions, and then pick whip up to that angle control. And now we should be able to bend those fingers a little bit. Hey, and those don't look too bad. That's not too shabby. A little bit pinchy there though, so let's see if we can fix that with a little bit of starch. We're not really going to necessarily try to straighten it out this way, although it doesn't look that terrible. But with a hand kind of already posed like this, just being able to open and close it like this a little bit will probably be enough for this kind of a character. Let's try to clean this up with a little starch. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is take the amount back to 1. That may even be a little high. And let's try just putting a little bit of starch kind of right in the middle of the hand here. Hey, that already seemed to help quite a bit. Let's test those fingers out right away. Okay, that's not too bad. Fingers are getting pretty pinchy right in there. But if we're going to do anything with the fingers, we got to do it really, really light. Let's see if we can just clean up those fingers a tiny bit, because that actually looks not too bad. We might just have to leave it at there. But let's see what we can do here. And I'm going to actually turn the amount way down to maybe, let's see, maybe 0.2. And we'll just maybe try just a touch, maybe just over here. Alright, still getting quite a bit of pinching unless I pull this pretty tight. Oops. So funny how kind of move one direction and the pinch gets bigger, and another direction the pinch gets smaller. I've never been able to master any kind of particular. There, that worked pretty good. Whoops, accidentally added a second. That looks pretty nice. Let's try those fingers again. Come on, After Effects. Okay, we're getting a little more movement up in here, but it's not bad. It's not too bad. See, it's kind of moving the whole thing now in a way that it wasn't quite before. Let's just double check that we actually want this to happen here. And you see how that relaxed that out? Yeah, we're getting a lot less of that motion there without the starch on the fingers. So I think I'm going to call that good enough. It's not perfect, and perhaps another 20 minutes of goofing around, we could get it just a little closer, but at a certain point you have to sort of accept the limitations of the artwork and the puppet tool such as they are, and look at your schedule and how much time you have to fuss and bother. But we've got a pretty nice setup here. This is working pretty good. All we really have to do is add the thumb in to kind of finish this up here. So let's go ahead and do that quickly. Let's solo the thumb for a second, and let's kind of move through this quickly. We're going to grab our puppet tool and we're going to add pin. Now here's a case where with such a tiny thing like this, there's really not a great reason for 1500. I'm going to at least take it down to half. That'll probably work just fine. And then let's just add 3 pins along here, one at the base, one in the middle, and one at the end. Now I recognize that there's actually more joints than that in a thumb, but we're going for something pretty simple here. We need that one pin in the middle there to bend this off of. So let's name our pins. Let's go ahead and add bone nulls to these. Bone nulls are kind of ridiculously large, but that's okay. And then let's go ahead and parent these up. Thumb tip to the mid, mid to the base. And then we want to parent the thumb artwork to the thumb base null as well. Now the thumb is just like a finger, so we're just going to go ahead and parent the base of that thumb to the hand, just like it was a finger. So to the hand null there. So let's go ahead and turn the arm on really quick, and let's just see if we're getting something decent here. Okay, that works pretty good. Let's see what happens when we flex the fingers. We got to starch that thumb a little bit. Yeah, that works pretty good. And let's just add a little bit of starch to this thumb so it bends a little more realistically, and then we'll add a control for it. In fact, let's add the control right away because that'll make this a little easier. I don't know why I didn't do that in the first place. So let's go ahead and add another angle control, and we'll call this right thumb. We still have this effect control window locked there, and we just need to take the middle thumb value and tie it to that angle control. And there, now we have that control. Now we could add also a control at the base here if we wanted. We could add a control for the base so you could move the thumb even more. That's totally possible as well. You just do the same thing, just add another angle control, take that rotation value, tie it to that. I'm going to skip that for now. I think this is enough to get a nice simple amount of control over this hand. So I'm going to leave that the way that is. But let's go ahead and bend the thumb a little bit, and let's starch it up a little so it works a little better. So we'll grab that thumb, hit the E, select the puppet, grab our starch tool, check our amount here. Let's put it back to 1. I always kind of like to start with that and then see what I need after that. I'm going to zoom in a little here. And we mostly want the starch right around the base here. There we go. And let's wiggle that thumb a little more. There we go. But it's pinching quite a bit here, so let's get a little more in the end. There we go, and maybe... There we go. Hey, that looks pretty nice. I wonder if we want to do just a little bit of overlapping. Let's turn our resolution all the way up here. It's be a little tough on the processor, but let's take a look at that. Yeah, we're getting kind of a weird little tangle there. Let's go ahead and select that puppet. We'll grab our overlap tool, turn that extent way down because it's just a little dinky thing. Let's go ahead and overlap that whole thumb so that thumb comes forward. Let's play around with that a little bit. Pull the extent out just a hair more. And let's see how that looks. Ugh, we're still getting a little mess in there. Actually looked better when I pulled it back. Oh, there we go. There. Okay, now let's see it in action here. I always really want to try things out in motion. That works pretty good. It's not perfect, but that works pretty nice, and we're getting a nice line there. That's kind of the most important thing here. Right now we have a pretty nice control here over this hand. Here, let's turn the resolution back down. Give the computer a break. Okay, so I can pose the fingers. I can pose the thumb, so I can kind of close the hand and open the hand in a pretty natural looking way. Okay, just realized that we forgot to set the anchor point on the original thumb artwork. And we should probably do that. Now, it's working fine the way it is because it's driven by a puppet tool. But again, it's a really good idea to parent this into our system here so the artwork is traveling along with the puppet pins, and it stresses out the puppet mesh a little bit less. So let's go ahead and select that guy, and there's the anchor point up here. We might want to zoom in here just a little bit. Oops, I still got to see that guy. And we'll use snapping here. So I've got my pan behind tool. I'm going to grab that anchor point. Then when we get it right in here, we'll hold down the command key and snap that into place. Okay, let's save that. And then while we're in this mode of tidying up our messes, let's get rid of that spare starch pin that we left in the arm that I thought we might need to come back to. I wasn't quite willing to let go of it because it did do some good. But in the end, it was no help to us. That's this one right here, I believe. Yeah, the one we turned down to 0. So let's just go ahead and delete that. Because there's so much trial and error with starching, particularly in these kind of delicate situations, I'll sometimes leave a starch pin in place with that amount turned down to 0 if that starch pin was maybe doing me some good, but I'm not totally convinced and I want to experiment. So I go off and I experiment. Sometimes in this case the experiment worked great. Other times the experiments don't go so well, and then I can at least just delete the experiment, go back to where I was at least close, and maybe try working from that place again. So it's just one of those little ways that I'm sort of covering my butt a little bit as I noodle down one path and another. Starching is definitely one of those things where I've never found a single formula that has worked in more than one situation. It's always very, very unique, and you have to do a lot of poking and prodding to get to what you need. So now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and do our cleanup here. So all these nulls default to being red, but we want to make those purple because they're all part of the right arm group, which should all be purple. So let's grab all of those. We can skip the 0 outs. They're not quite so important. And besides, that's about the controller. And the controllers, I don't follow the same color code I use in the actual guts of the rig. The controllers I tend to do right and left, red and purple, and then center green, because they tend to show up the best, and it gives a little differentiation between right and left and center controls. But in the guts I just do these simple little rainbows, but I like to be consistent, because when you have to go in and do revisions or anything like that, you want to be able to quickly find all the stuff associated with one part or another. Now you can set this up however you want. You can color code and organize however you want. I just recommend that you do organize somehow, and using the color coding or your naming, however you do it, do something to stay organized and keep chaos away. And those of you that have taken my Character Animation Bootcamp course know how much I hate chaos in the animation process. Guess what? I hate it even worse in rigging. So you always want to be kind of battling that because, remember, right now we're just doing these single arms. And look at already how many pieces and parts and things and bits we're creating just for one arm. By the time you get a whole rig, even a fairly simple rig put together, you've got a lot of layers, a lot of stuff going on. Stay organized however you choose to organize. So I'm going to go ahead and change these to purple. So all of those are in the purple group. We'll leave our solo buttons as they are. Let's go ahead and lock everything. Whoops, I locked the controller by accident. Except the controller. Lock everything except the controller. Okay, then let's go ahead and toggle our switches and modes here, and let's shy everything except the controller. Okay, and let's turn off the visibility. Actually, we should turn it off here. Turn off the visibility of those null objects. We don't need those. Alright, and then let's go ahead and hit the shy button to end up with our nice clean interface here, where we can just click and drag and manipulate that arm easily. Finessing the puppet tool is definitely time consuming, particularly when you're working with artwork with a lot of detail or a high level of realism. Make sure you plan ahead for giving that extra time for experimenting and trial and error when you're trying to do these more difficult puppet tool jobs. But hopefully we've shown you some good tricks and techniques to help you solve some common problems dealing with the puppet tool starching and the puppet overlap tool.